This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. At least 20 people died Sunday when a Saudi-led coalition airstrike hit a wedding party in northern Yemen. Most of the dead were reportedly women and children who were gathered in one of the wedding party tents. The bride was among the dead. Medics and residents said more than 46 others, including 30 children, were also injured. Video footage released by the Yemeni TV station Al Jazeera showed a young boy clutching his dead father who was surrounded by rubble. The boy was shouting, "I swear I won't leave him." The attack on the Yemeni wedding party was one of at least 3 airstrikes over the weekend that killed Yemeni civilians. A family of 5 died in an airstrike in the province of Hajj, and 20 civilians died on Saturday when fighter jets bombed a bus near the city of Taiz.
Meanwhile, Yemen's rebel Houthi movement said senior leader Salah al-Sammad had been killed in a Saudi-led coalition airstrike last Thursday. The rebel group warned Sammad's killing was a crime that would, quote, not go unanswered. Sammad is the most senior Houthi official to have been killed since the Western-backed coalition intervened in Yemen in March 2015. More than 15,000 people have died since the Saudi invasion, while U.S.-backed Saudi-led airstrikes have devastated Yemen's health, water and sanitation systems, sparking a massive cholera outbreak. About 1 million Yemenis are believed to have cholera, and pushing millions of Yemenis to the brink of starvation. Earlier this month, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Yemen had become the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
Every 10 minutes, a child under 5 dies of preventable causes. And nearly 3 million children under 5 and pregnant or lactating women are actually malnourished. Nearly half of all children aged between 6 months and 5 years old are chronically malnourished and suffer from stunting, which causes development delays and reduced ability to learn throughout their entire lives.
To find out more about the situation in Yemen, we're going now to Boston to speak with Shireen al-Adeimi, a Yemeni doctoral candidate at Harvard University. Her recent piece for In These Times is headlined, "Trump Doesn't Care About Civilian Deaths, Just Look at Yemen." Welcome to Democracy Now!, Shireen. Can you talk about what you understand happened with the Saudi bombing of the Yemeni wedding party that resulted in at least 20 deaths, many of them women and children? Where did this happen?
Thanks so much for having me. And what happened a couple of days ago in Yemen is not unusual. So this happened in a northern province in Hajj, nowhere near the front lines. This, of course, was a civilian wedding. They struck the men's wedding first, the men's wedding party, and then as rescuers were trying to attend to the injured, they went and bombed the women's part of the wedding. So this is a double tap airstrike that is very common in the Saudi-led war on Yemen. 33 were reported to have been killed and several more injured. Tens have been injured, and 30 children are included in this list of people who are injured. This is a wedding. This is supposed to be the happiest day of people's lives, and instead the bride was killed, the groom injured, and so many more guests ended up killed as well.
And Shireen, for people here who don't understand, since this is a war that Saudi Arabia is waging, how important is the American support, the U.S. support for this war?
So starting with the Obama administration and continuing into the Trump administration, the Saudis have enjoyed extensive support from the U.S. Army. Right from day one, March 26, 2015, when Saudi Arabia began bombing, the U.S. was right alongside helping them with targeting, with logistics. They helped maintain and update their vehicles. And most importantly, the U.S. refuels Saudi jets mid-air, jets that we've sold to them, jets that, bombs that we've sold to them. But we also help operate them. So as they're bombing civilian targets in Yemen, the U.S. Army helps refuel those jets midair. So U.S. support of the Saudis is extensive, and the U.S. claims that we are there to help them with precision targeting, but the fact of the matter is that civilians have bared the brunt of this war. You mentioned 15,000 people have been killed. That's just the number of people who've been killed by airstrikes. We also help them maintain the blockade that's killed 113,000 children in 2016 and 2017 alone due to malnutrition and disease, because water is very limited in the country. Yemen used to import 90% of its food, and that's now become very difficult for people to afford or to find. And so, many people are on the brink, but many people have already been killed and have lost their lives because they just can't find food and water and medicine for, preventable diseases like cholera.
Shireen, can you talk about Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's overseen the Saudi strikes on Yemen? Can you talk about his recent, what they call charm offensive throughout the United States, from Washington to Houston to Hollywood? Talk about the significance of this. When President Trump met with him at the White House last month, he held up posters of recent Saudi weapons purchases from the U.S. and said, quote, "We make the best equipment in the world."
Saudi Arabia has been a very great friend and a big purchaser of equipment and lots of other things. Some of the things that we're now working on, and that have been ordered and will shortly be started in construction and delivered. THAAD system, $13 billion. The C-130 airplanes, the Hercules, great plane, $3.8 billion. The Bradley vehicles, that's the tanks, $1.2 billion. And the P-8 Poseidons, $1.4 billion. So we make the best equipment in the world. There's nobody even close. And Saudi Arabia is buying a lot of this equipment.
Shireen al-Adeimi, the posters that President Trump was holding, almost like a high school presentation, was a map of the United States. As he talked about the weapons, these weapons were sourced to places in the United States, states in the United States. Can you talk about this? Human rights groups warning about the weapons that the massive arms deal that may make the United States complicit in war crimes committed in the Saudi-led bombing campaign in Yemen.
Right. So, of course, Saudi Arabia doesn't manufacture its own weapons. They rely on countries like the U.S. and the UK and even Canada to supply them with the weapons needed to wage this incredibly destructive war on a country that really posed no threat to them. So Yemen doesn't even have an air defense system. They've disabled that, and it's a country that's not even able to defend itself. So they've been purchasing these weapons, totaling in the hundreds of billions of dollars, simply for the cause, for the sake of trying to assert control and dominance and trying to win this war that's really unwinnable in Yemen. But, Trump was being transparent about why Mohammed bin Salman was in the U.S., and reportedly Mohammed bin Salman was embarrassed by those posters. But Trump essentially was saying, well, yes, this is the relationship that we have with Saudi Arabia, one that's based on, how much they can pay for our services. I mentioned all the logistical training and updating of aircraft and so on. Those total $129 million per month. So we're making a lot of money. The U.S. is making a lot of money from their relationship with Saudi Arabia. Human rights groups, of course, have warned that these weapons are not being used for any reason other than to target civilians. And countries like Germany and the Netherlands have recently stopped selling weapons to the United Arab Emirates and the Saudi Arabians, for this very reason. But here, Prince Charming, he was. We protested his visit here in Boston at MIT, but, places like MIT and Harvard and people like Oprah and the Clintons and, like you said, President Trump, they've all met with him, and they've all, he went unchallenged when he was doing interviews here in the United States. And he's not just anybody in the Saudi Arabian royal family. He is the architect of this Yemen war. He is the defense minister and crown prince. This war began under his command. And so this is somebody who's caused extreme suffering in a country. The UN says that the Yemen is the world's worst humanitarian crisis. He has caused this, and we're helping him perpetuate this, yet he was virtually unchallenged while in the United States.
And Shireen, what about, obviously the United States continues to justify its support under the continuing war on terrorism, and also the attempts to hold back supposed Iranian influence on terrorist groups. What about the situation with ISIS and al-Qaeda and other international terrorist groups within Yemen? Could you talk about that as well, and also the Iran issue?
Right. So Congress has declared that the role of the United States in Yemen in helping Saudi Arabia in this war in Yemen is not covered under that, under fighting terrorism. So it's unconstitutional. It's unauthorized by Congress. But like you mentioned, the U.S. is in Yemen on two different fronts. On the one hand, they are trying to target, anybody suspected of being al-Qaeda or ISIS, and that's largely done through drone strikes that really escalated under Obama's administration and have continued through Trump's administration. And then the other front, which is unauthorized by Congress, is this, this blanket support of Saudi Arabia in its war on Yemen. Now, they've mentioned Iran as a cause, as a reason to intervene in Yemen. The facts of the matter is that, there's very little evidence that Iran is interfering in any significant way in Yemen. Like I mentioned, there's a land, air, and sea blockade that Saudi Arabia and the United States impose on Yemen. Doctors Without Borders have trouble bringing their personnel, their medicine, their food, their doctors into the country. UN ships have trouble bringing food into the country, but we're somehow led to believe that Iran is able to smuggle missiles or other sorts of weapons to Yemen. So for Yemenis, it's really absurd to think that they're fighting Iran in Yemen. There is no evidence of any Iranian soldiers or any Iranian generals on the ground in Yemen. Of course, the Houthis and Iran have some sort of relationship, but it doesn't. It's very limited, and Iran is not involved in Yemen in the same degree that Saudi Arabia has been claiming. So, Congress has tried to pull the United States out of Yemen, recognizing that it's unauthorized. Bernie Sanders recently introduced a bill in the Senate called SJ Res 54, which was eventually tabled in the Senate. They didn't even vote on it. But that was attempting to extricate the United States out of hostilities in Yemen, and by invoking the War Resolutions Act.
And the significance of the Yemen's Houthi movement saying that a senior political figure had died in an attack last Thursday, Salah al-Sammad. Who is al-Sammad?
So the Houthis, in partnership with the prior president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, who maintained significant control in Yemen, they formed a political council that governed, northern areas that they control. Now, the Houthis control a small portion of land, if you look at the map, but about 80% of the population live there. So they still maintain large control over the country compared to what Saudi Arabia controls, which is, land that they control along with ISIS and al-Qaeda and other groups. So, they formed this political council as a way to govern, and Sammad was the head of that political council. And Saudi Arabia took him out in an airstrike, and there was video posted online yesterday of that attack. It's an assassination, essentially, and I don't know what comes next. Here they are. There's no hope really for a peace process if leaders like that are going to be executed by Saudi Arabia. So I'm really not sure what comes next.
Shireen al-Adeimi, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Yemeni doctoral student at Harvard University. She's been speaking out about the role of the United States in the Saudi-led war in Yemen. We'll link to your piece, and in these times, it's headline, Trump doesn't care about civilian deaths, just look at Yemen. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, there is a power transfer in Cuba. We'll talk about its significance. Stay with us.